To the Community Redevelopment Agency special meeting, Wednesday, October 12th, 2022 at 2 p.m. Special meeting is now called to order. Citizens' comments not on the agenda. Is there anyone that's got a comment that's not on the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay, moving on. Consent agenda. We
Mr.
have
Chair.
4 items.
Mr. Chair, I would like to discuss item C.
Okay,
Okay, so I will move for approval of consent agenda items A, B, and C.
D.
Oh, I'm sorry, A, B, and D. Sorry about that. I apologize. I was trying to be so distinct.
okay, that's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Chair Coachman?
Coker? Oh, okay. Yeah, I feel like this should be an HR decision, that it should not be something that we should be involved in. And I just don't understand why HR isn't handling this.
Yeah, if I can, this is an HR decision as to whether or not the FMLA is approved. This is just simply because there's got to be typically it would be the supervisor they would then go to coordinate scheduling the schedule and what they need to do to accommodate the schedule. And we don't have anybody in that role here, so that's all it is. There's no, and you can.
Is there a policy that you follow?
There's law to be followed with regard to whether or not the FMLA is approved, but then at that point it is up to the supervisor to figure out what makes sense in terms of the timing of the schedule.
So that there's not like a policy. There's no policy in place. It's just up to the discretion? Okay.
Once it's approved, then yes, then it's up to the supervisor to figure out what makes sense from a scheduling standpoint.
Okay.
And in this case, we don't have a official supervisor other than the board, so we need to have somebody in that role.
And how much are we allowed to discuss
Probably
because of
not.
FMLA?
None. No, we can't get into the
That's
background
why I
or of the
don't
request
like
or anything
seeing it
like
on
that.
here, and I don't understand why HR would not be doing this. That's what I don't understand.
Yeah, and they did. I mean, they've handled the whole thing. It just, now they get to the end and, it's just, right, it's just about working out the schedule.
And so, first thing I did was went to HR. The very
Okay.
first thing I did was went to HR to see what the policy was and how to handle
Okay.
it. And they were the ones that said, something has to be done this way, because this board is in charge of this department, and it has to be someone.
Yeah,
And that's why you see the updated agenda memo that went out that took out that language that said anything was being approved, because it is approved through HR. It's just a coordination of the schedule.
okay. Well,
And I was hoping HR was gonna reach and talk to each one of you separately, because I can't. Because that's what I asked. I
Yeah.
asked HR to talk to each
this
one of you
just doesn't
separately.
seem like the right way to do it. But if that's all we have to do, I just feel like I would hate to see, you don't know who's gonna be sitting in the chair position all along, and what if it becomes political? It just seems like it should be more of an administrative type, HR thing. And I don't know, I'm not an expert or know the law. It just doesn't seem right to me. That's why I had to talk about it.
Yeah, you're right. It is, and I had the same reaction when I saw this thing on agenda. I'm like, oh no, we're not. I don't. Right.
Right.
So then it got explained to me that they just need to have somebody to talk to coordinate the schedule, and that's all it is.
Okay.
Like, if it was a public works employee, then Jim
Right.
would be the person, but because we're the whole board as supervisors, it's like just establishing one go-to.
Yeah, and
Okay.
And I I can't even say that, I hear your concerns. And
Yeah.
So,
But there's no other way to do it.
I.
Okay. Okay, I just needed the explanation. Okay, I'll move to approve, item C, to authorize the CRA chair to represent the CRA board on FMLA-related matters.
Second.
It's motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, we're down to the presentation.
Today we have with us Mr. Jared Parker and Dr. Clyde Dieo from the Regional Economic Consulting Group. A few months ago, this board approved to hire this group and do an economic impact study on the 14th Street West properties that we own. Today they're here. They have finalized the report, which we have put on the desk, and also they're going to give a presentation and here to answer any of your questions. So, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having us. Thank you very much, Chairman Patrick Ralph, and the rest of the members of the board as well as commissioners. And thank you very much, Katerina, for having us, for allowing us to actually work on this project, which is a very important project for the city. So first of all, I'd like to mention about who we are. We are actually with the Regional Economics Consulting Group. It's actually a research group that's based in Tampa and Tallahassee, and we do a lot of measuring the economic impacts of public and private sector. We do a lot of work on economic outlooks for demographics as well as labor market studies using different economic tools like in-plan, model, cost-benefit analysis, and general input-output analysis, as well as the econometric modeling, which is really my specialty. And we bring a very unique perspective being economists, because we were also like economists for the state for a long time. I was an economist for the state for 34 years, and I served like I was also the lead economist for 4 governors in Florida at the executive office of the governor, and that's where I retired and left, And also, I was the chief economist for the Department of Environmental Regulation or Protection at the time, and did a lot of economic analysis there. And I also have here Jared Parker, who's my partner. He was an economist with the EDR. It's called Economic and Demographics Research for 7 years. It's the arm of the Florida legislature. And before that, he was also part of the tax research unit at the Department of Revenue for 3 years. And his specialty is on projecting revenues and determining fiscal impacts. He's been involved in tax policy, economic development, and even constitutional amendments, including utility deregulation and solar choice in Florida. That's where we actually started working together when we work on the communication services tax.
Oh, yeah.
He was with the legislature and I was with the governor. And he got his master's too at Florida State University. And that's where I got my master's and PhD. So anyway.
I was going to ask you to go back to the slide that had your credentials on it.
Oh,
because,
okay.
I cannot help but notice the master's and the PhD from Florida State University as a World Bank scholar, and
Yeah.
then your colleague as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I got my
so-
master's and PhD at Florida
Yes,
State.
well.
I came from the Philippines originally and came here as a World Bank scholar. I was sent here to study. Then decided to,
Well, the three of
stay.
us ladies up here are very happy to see you.
yeah. And the state of
quiet.
Florida, in fact, was the one that petitioned for me to stay here. So they hired me, actually, that's how. But anyway, it's been a very good year. I mean, having work experience with the state, and I think gave us a lot of perspective and a lot of experience in terms of anything that's related to policy on a statewide basis. So anyway, these are the 3 objectives that we've established here, which is to determine and analyze the opportunity cost and the economic impacts of the construction of the new city of Bradenton City Hall. So we're actually going to be looking at what are we losing here if we don't transfer or move the City Hall to 14th Street? Because we're just focusing on 14th Street right now. And basically looking at other options that are out there. You know, we have to come up with certain options and compare the economic impacts of putting City Hall in 14th Street versus other options such as putting up restaurants, a multifamily home, and retail. Those are the three things that we think would probably most likely be built over there, you know. So we compare the economic impacts of building a City Hall versus those three other options. And another thing is that we would like to determine and analyze the feasible economic development options tied to the construction of the new City Hall and the development of the 14th Street CRA district. So we're gonna go through a lot of tables here, explaining to you the impacts. Then the third is to measure the possible maximum economic expansion over time because of new developments. That means that we're gonna look at what's gonna happen in the future if, for instance, you build a City Hall there and look at the maximum potential of economic benefits that the city will get. So we're talking about the maximum here. So my partner here will in fact explain that to you later. So basically we're gonna be looking at impacts like direct and indirect and induced impacts, effects in the following. So we're gonna be looking at the number of jobs created, labor income generated, the value added to the regional gross domestic product, the economic output, and also the tax revenues generated by all these economic activities. So the next is we also look at the market analysis. We also do the market analysis here. Manatee is home to around 412,000 people spread out across 6 towns with the rest of the unincorporated areas. So the population, in fact, grew by 3.3% over the year. And within the proximity of Bradenton, that includes Sarasota County, you're talking about 850,000 people. That is your market there. And why is population vital to an analysis? Because people, in fact, drives the aggregate demand for goods and services. It drives economic activities, and basically it expands the economic base. And this is what we do on a statewide basis. You know, I developed the economic model for the state that does a lot of these projections, which is the basis for the state budget. I always include population there. And in fact, we forecast population for the next 10 to 15 or 20 years because population drives the economy. Population growth drives the economy. Most of the people are coming from out of state, out of the country, coming here. We're talking about around almost 360,000 people coming to Florida every year. That's a lot of people. And I'm sure a lot of them also come here, you know, especially in this county. So we look at Manatee County with 412,000 people spread across 6 towns. We also need to look at, okay, what are the other factors that drive the economy? Is basically like employment and income. So employment here in the Manatee County grew by 4% from 2020 to 2021. That's 111,000 to 116,000 people. Job growth. So there's, in Manatee County, actually, its median income per household is around close to $60,000 in 2020 dollars. So we also look at the city of Bradenton. The city of Bradenton has a population of 56,551, and 26, around a little bit over, 50%, which is 26,642 are in fact employed. And the median income per household in Bradenton is around 48,369. Then we look at the 14th Street CRA district. The corresponding census tract of the 14th Street CRA district within Bradenton hold a population of around 11,846 in 2019. The number of employed persons living in or near the 14th Street district is around 5,000. So that creates, another thing that I guess we we have to consider is the tourists that come here. Based on the statistics that we got, in 2021, there were like almost like 1 million tourists that in fact visited Manatee County, and I'm sure a lot of them also visited Bradenton. And that has created an economic impact of around $1.3 billion in 2021. And in 2020, which was actually during the height of the pandemic, there were like 909 million people that in fact visited Bradenton. But prior to that, in 2017, when things were normal then, we consider that normal before the pandemic, there were like 3.1 million people in fact who visited Manatee County. So that's a lot of people. That creates a lot of demand for goods and services, particularly, restaurants and hotels and rental cars and all that stuff. Okay, so that is your market. That is your market. Okay, I think Jared will discuss about the market analysis here, the regional economy.
Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to run through this table real quick for you guys. This is the economic profile of the county, the city, and the 14th Street CRA, and we're pretty proud of this table. We used 12 actual individual economic sectors that range from anything from manufacturing to information, finance, and we looked at the number of jobs that were tied to each of those sectors at the county level, the city level, and then we narrowed it down to the 14th Street CRA, and we looked at their aggregate income. And we kind of used that as a input, and we dynamically modeled it to get an idea of the kind of weight the different jurisdictions play on the regional economy. So based on this, we have Manatee County. It provides 162,556 jobs directly. So these are people living in Manatee that are employed in Manatee. And then when you factor in the supply chain and consumption, you add a whole other 72,200 jobs. Now, supply chain, that part's pretty straightforward. It's people delivering goods from one place to the other. The consumption side are the jobs that are created off of the employees, these actual individual jobs, spending their money elsewhere. So whether they go out to eat, if they buy at retail establishments, how many jobs does that produce? And in this case, it produced 72,260. And in total, the county is 234,816 jobs. Bradenton, we have 23,642 directly employed that live here, but the whole area accounts for 32,000 jobs, give or take, due again to the supply chain and the consumption side. The labor income, Bradenton is over $1.2 billion when you factor in all of the elements. The local GDP for the city of Bradenton is $1.8 billion, and then the total economic output for Bradenton is $3.6 billion. And then when you factor down on the 14th Street CRA, those same numbers is labor income. Just that region is paying about $228 million a year to their workforce, and they're producing $343 million in goods and services, and then their total aggregate output's another $627 million. So this will be important when we get later on to do the comparative scenarios, but to give an idea, this is the base that we're operating off of.
So there's the difference between the value-added contribution to GDP. GDP is actually the total sum of all the goods and services produced in the economy, but that does not include intermediate products. What are intermediate products? Intermediate products are raw materials that are in fact used to produce these goods and services. Okay. Now, in the case of economic output, it's the total sum of all goods and services produced in the economy, but that includes intermediate products. So that's the difference between the two. But in terms of measuring the economic output, we always use the last one, which is the economic output. Anyway, so in order to come up with these scenarios, because we have to come up with scenarios, because the only thing we got was actually, okay, we're going to be like transferring this, moving the city hall to this place. That's the only thing we have. And of course, the cost of building the new city hall. So we have to come up with scenarios then, and compare the scenarios, compare the building of the city hall with the other scenarios in order to calculate more or less the opportunity cost. Okay. So the group actually uses the baseline assumptions, set ground rules for the analysis ahead. So there are four, as I mentioned, there are four types of development that could utilize the locations at 14th Street West in Bradenton. We have the local government building, which is the City Hall. Then we also look at the multifamily development, assuming if they're going to build like multifamily homes in that area. We also look at the retail business and the restaurant establishments. We did not include hotels, condominiums, and non-retail offices because they're unlikely to develop at 14th Street. They're not going to go there because of, it's a low-income level area, and the conditions at the 14th Street are not very suitable for this kind of development. So, therefore, we only look at, multifamily because there's in fact like apartments that are being built right now over there. Retail, business, and restaurant establishments. And so we came up with these assumptions then for the City Hall. We got these numbers from you guys. It's like $20 million. That's the total cost. And with a City Hall budget of around $8 million. So this $8 million was based on 120
workers.
120 workers making an average of around 40,000. Then whatever is the difference would be the benefits that the city will have to pay them. So basically we came up with $8 million. And we discussed this with the staff here, with Katerina and Chris, and they said, well, that's reasonable. That's the most important thing, is to make sure that the assumptions are reasonable. Because it's always like, you can come up with numbers, but if the assumptions are wrong, then you get like wrong analysis. That's what it is. So for multifamily, we came up with $299 per square foot. And this came from Cummings Consulting Group, which is a very well-known group here in the U.S. They have like 1,510 members and 40 offices all over the world. And we also came up with a rental per unit of $1,600 per month. And that is based on the average.
That's based on the size of that development,
Yeah.
roughly using market rates on capitalization. How much would it take? What would be the average rent per unit to hit a market average capitalization rate?
And we also look at the average prevailing rent around this area.
Yeah.
Especially the new ones. I mean, it's a little bit more expensive. So the square footage per apartment is around 850 square feet. And we also assume like an occupancy rate of 92%. For the retail, the construction cost per square foot is $253. Again, we got this from Cummings Consulting Group. And the retail capitalization rate is 7%. And the retail rent to revenue ratio is 10%. So why is this capitalization rate very important? Because capitalization rate is considered like the return on assets or the return on the market value of the property. And that's important especially for developers as well as for proprietors. So we assume 7%, which is within the standard, because the standard usually ranges from 5 to 10%. And that is the basis also we use to calculate the total revenues. Then for restaurant, the construction cost per square foot is $404, and this came from Aaron Allen and Associates Restaurant Global Consultants. Then we assume like a capitalization rate of 5.8% because restaurants usually have low margins, and restaurant rent to revenue ratio we assume 8%. So those are the kind of things that we have to make the assumptions because before we can come up with all these scenarios. Okay, we have to make those assumptions in order to come up with these various scenarios. So our approach here involves, it's a two-pronged approach. First, we look at the static impact. What is the static impact? Basically, they're just direct expenditures that the city or the other options will in fact incur as a result of construction as well as operating these businesses. So the construction phase looks at the cost per square foot of the building multiplied by the total square feet. Then the operations are basically just the sum of expenditures per year of the developments. So the thing about the difference between the two is that construction expenditures actually stops when the construction activity actually ends, you know? But the operational cost actually continues on until the business actually shuts down. So the operating cost of the new city hall, however, we assume that it will not be a new economic impact because it's not new money infused into the local economy. You're already spending your operating costs here, so it's just moving that operating cost from here to 14th Street. That's what you're doing. So it's just a shift from one part of the city to another. The multifamily operations phase combines the proprietor and tenant into a single entity. So the monthly rent multiplied by the total number of units and 12 months equals basically the revenue of the multifamily complex. Restaurants and retail operations are basically divided into between proprietor and tenants. The proprietor's revenue is rental income calculated by the capitalization rate, or an annual revenue percentage as a function of the property value. The rental income tenants pays divided by the standard rent to revenue ratio to derive the total revenue. So basically both rental and tenant revenues values are combined and converted into local expenditures. So what did we do? First, we estimated the static impacts, the direct expenditures of building all these scenarios, building all this like from city hall to multifamily to restaurants to retail, and use those numbers then to input as an input to our model, which is the implant model. It's an economic model that basically calculates the ripple effects of all these expenditures to the local economy. So the model then, the dynamic model actually depicts the inter-industry relationship within an economy, leading then to how the output from one industrial sector may become an input to another industrial sector. So what does that mean? So in other words, for instance, if you spend 20 million, one example is you buy bread at Publix, right? You spend $10, okay? Or $20.
$10, how
$10.
Getting there.
But Publix, since
I was
they
gonna
also
say,
make their own,
I'm a
bake their own
no-carb
bread,
kind of girl right now.
okay, they also bake their own bread, has to depend on other raw materials, and they have to get it from other industries, right? To make that bread. So that's how the relationship of these various industries actually work. The same thing with construction expenditures. You put in money into this construction, you get labor, you spend on labor cost, so forth and so on, but you also have to buy raw materials and or what do you call this, building materials from Lowe's or Home Depot. Now, then you spend money, of course, with your laborers. And they use that money to buy goods and services, right? Or retail products. The same thing with laborers that in fact are employed with Home Depot and Lowe's. They're paid by those entities, and they also spend money on other things. So that's how they create these economic activities. That's how this model actually works. Okay? So therefore, a change in one industry could affect one industry's either directly, indirectly, or induced level. So that's the induced level is actually when they spend money on the economy, when laborers get the money and actually like spend on the economy. So the goal of the dynamic analysis is basically to select a series of multipliers. So this is based on multipliers that, in fact, that's produced by RIMS2. RIMS2 is a Bureau of Economic Analysis multipliers from the US BEA. So direct spending by one industry and how it affects other sectors. So the study dynamic phase uses city hall, multifamily, retail, and restaurant expenditures as an economic shock. It is an economic shock because you're actually spending that money in one particular area, although overall it may not like it's gonna affect that particular area at the same time that the city, because you're spending money on that area there. But the operational cost may not have an impact overall, but you're just moving that impact from here to there, right? So the shock produces ripple effects on the number of jobs. So that's what we're going to calculate here. Is the number of jobs, labor income, value added to the GDP, and the economic output. And because of our background in tax policy and revenue estimating, we actually have to calculate manually the tax revenues here. Because if you just use that economic model, it's not very, very accurate, you know, because it's almost like it's applied to every county. No, it doesn't work that way. Each county has different tax rates and millage rates. So we use the millage rates to, in fact, like calculate this tax impacts here, particularly here in Bradenton. So, okay, go ahead. And he's gonna discuss about the analysis as well as the direct expenditures. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so starting here with the direct expenditures in Table 1, this kind of gets into the meat of our analysis and what we found in the report. Again, this is a theoretical comparison that kind of provides ideas on what an optimal economic engine would look like in the 14th Street CRA district. And it is necessary to note is that the land values of the 14th Street CRA district are typically cheaper than they would be if the closer you get to the water. So you're always going to have a reduced opportunity cost, especially when you always need a city hall. It has to go somewhere. It's better to put it in cheaper land than more expensive land. So Table 1, this, as Clyde was talking about, these are our direct expenditures. And you have a construction, you have two phases here, construction and operations. Construction is basically the number of square footage times the cost per square foot. City Hall, which based on conversations with staff, the idea is that it will be approximately 40,000 square feet. So you multiply 40,000 square feet times, I think it was $400 a square foot, that came out to 20 million. And then we do a localized spending. We assume that 80% of the money spent on construction stays local. And this is because you're mostly hiring local workers, and the material, while it might not originate in Bradenton, it's sourced through Bradenton. So we have 80% of that 20 million and 16 million spent in the local economy. The other three scenarios, multifamily, retail, and restaurants, we make different assumptions on the total square footage. The lot is only about 2 acres, so that kind of limits the capacity of a multifamily development. And we said, okay, City Hall's 40,000 square feet. Let's go ahead and assume multifamily's 40,000 square feet. Now, based on the square footage cost, which I think was $250 per square foot times the 40,000 square feet, you get your almost $12 million in total spending. And again, 80% of that stays in the local economy at 9.5 million. Retail and restaurant, you can see that the total square footage drops significantly. And the reason why is that how many singular retail establishments are you going to have next to each other on a 2-acre lot? Probably not very many. We said 2 here because based on national data, average retail square footage is about 5,000 square feet per single entity. And the same with the restaurant. You're only going to have 1 or 2 restaurants that could go on that lot. So at the end of the day, we chose 10,000 square foot for both of those. And as you can see, total spending for retail is 2.5 million, and 2 million would stay local. And then for restaurant, because a restaurant's a more expensive building, it's going to be 4 million that's spending, with 3.2 million staying local. The operations side, so this is the revenue that these establishments generate and how much of that stays local. City Hall, obviously, it's a government building, so there is no revenue, and we're going to go ahead and assume that $8 million is localized spending, which is mostly going towards salaries and benefits for the employees. Multifamily is 831,000, so it's far and away the lowest of the three options. That's because 40,000 square feet does not afford you very many apartments, and it's
like, I think 47 units.
47 units.
Yeah,
And then
47 units.
we assume, in this case, we assumed 80% of that spending would stay local, and that left us with $540,311. The retail, we have 2.1 million local revenue spending, and this is what Clyde discussed earlier, using capitalization rates to back into a rent number, and then using rent to revenue ratios, we can approximate how much a retail establishment of that size would make in total revenue, which would be about 2.1 million. Now, only half of that is going to stay local, and that's because retail, you're going to hire local, but a lot of your inputs, the items that you're selling, are coming from out of the region. And then lastly, restaurants, we assume 3.4 million, and this uses the same methodology that retail does, where we start with capitalization rates, back into how much rent would be and then use rent to revenue ratios to determine total revenue, we assume 65% of that would stay local. And that's because while we know employees would be local, we also know some of the food would be local, a lot of the material, they're going to be going out of the area.
Yeah, they're
So,
gonna be buying it from outside, you know. That's why we only assume 65% for this.
yeah. So this construction impacts, table 2, this gets into the ripple effect. And you can almost think of it like the direct expenditure is a rock, and then you throw it in a pond, you get the ripples. That's the construction impacts. Most importantly on this table, these are temporary impacts because construction phase is temporary.
Yeah.
You know, we found from building City Hall, you're gonna have about 189 employees directly, or 189 construction workers directly employed, 242 of those if you count the supply chain. Multifamily, since it's a lower dollar per square footage, you're gonna have less workers per square foot, and it's also a smaller it's same size development, but it's just a lower expenditure rate. You're only gonna have 125 direct workers, or total workers. And then for retail and restaurant, these are much smaller scale projects. So you're gonna have only 31 workers for retail, and since restaurants are slightly more expensive, slightly more technical, you're gonna have a few more construction workers to the tune of about 49 anyhow.
Well, you know, it's also a function of the square footage. We assume that for retail and restaurants, only like 10,000
Yeah.
square feet total.
Beyond that, you can kind of see labor income, value add, and the economic output numbers. City Hall is far and away the highest. It outpaces multifamily by about $2 million and $7 million over retail, and what was that, $6.5 million over restaurants. Again, the total economic weight, again, so we're point of these scenarios to compare them is to give an idea the scale that City Hall would be compared to any other development. Value added in the economic output of City Hall is at least 3 million larger than the next largest development, which is your multifamily, and then 10 million larger for economic output than multifamily. So this table 3, this one's really important because it kind of gets in, or not kind of, it does, it gets into the opportunity cost argument. And we determined after writing this report that it's multifamily, retail, and restaurants are most likely not going to go in there. They haven't gone in there, and you would need a pretty large incentive package to attract. And there's just not a lot of demand in that area.
Well,
And
yeah, the thing about it is that those lots have been vacant for a long time, and nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. So, you know, by putting the City Hall in that area, that will create a lot of economic activities there.
so what we kind of, the way we frame the opportunity cost is that it's not the cost of whether you build City Hall or a multifamily establishment, because you have to build City Hall. It's really the fact that you're delaying the construction of a new City Hall here and delaying the benefits of constructing, benefits of a new mixed-use development here, and delaying the benefits of building a new City Hall in the 14th Street. So in that case, you can almost say that the impact of not doing this is anywhere from 0 to negative, which would make it a pretty high opportunity cost. One of the big pieces I wanted to highlight in this table is if you look at labor income, you see the 7.7 million versus the 46,000 versus the 614,000 versus 1.2 million. If you bring in 120 workers and really 145 workers when you count in the supply chain, that's 7.7, almost 7.8 million. That's kind of your economic fuel that you're going to be bringing into that local region. And none of the other developments, all the other developments kind of pale in comparison to that. That's going to be the money that people are going to have in their pockets. They can come back on the weekends because now they're familiar with this area, perception's changed. They can spend over at the Arts District. If and when we assume that new retail establishments come around, this is money that you can spend at those stores that otherwise you couldn't have without the development.
That is the big difference between construction operational cost versus this thing, because this one here is it's a yearly thing. It's a yearly expenditure.
And the other important piece about City Hall versus multifamily retail and restaurant, and specifically retail and restaurants, City Hall brings population, which Clyde was talking about earlier as to why population is so important. It brings workers to the area. Retail and restaurants don't really do that. They can't, they're clearly not gonna provide the level of employment. But furthermore, retail and restaurants chase demand. It doesn't necessarily, you're not gonna put a restaurant in a really terrible area and expect the whole area to pop up. You're gonna wanna put either multifamily or an office building or a city hall. But when, in this situation, when you're looking at that 2-acre lot and you're thinking about saying, hey, let's put in multifamily here, it's not big enough to bring in the number of bodies that a city hall could be. Because again, we were only talking 47 units. And so if you assume
Probably around
47
90.
people plus maybe another 20 or 30 people, you're still almost half of the amount of population that a city hall development could bring in. This next table, this is the 14th Street corridor capacity, and this leads into the next phase of the study, which was kind of saying that, okay, if City Hall's built there, what could develop, or how much development capacity is there? And thanks to Katarina's office, we were able to, they were kind enough to help us see all the empty lots, or give us data on all the empty lots.
So these are all the empty lots available right now.
And there's about 4 acres, but of that, there's 3.74 acres that are really developable, that you could develop. This is, you know, this is the next stage of benefit of putting a catalyst in that area. Maximum potential development, so table 4, this gets into what could go in there, or how much could go in there at the end of the day, like how much space is there. And we made a couple different assumptions here. We divide it between, as you can see, multifamily, retail, and restaurants. Multifamily, I know there's a development going in there currently across the street from the lot. We went ahead and said, okay, what if we put in another 100 apartments? Because a lot of these lots they're not very big, so it kind of limits the scale of development for multifamily. And we said if you did another 100 rooms, or I think it was 100 front doors, it'd be about 81,457 square feet. We then took the rest of the square footage available. And again, we're assuming that every development in this area is 2 stories. So it's 3.74 acres times 2 for the square footage. That gives you the 325,000 square feet. You then subtract out of that 325,000 square feet the multifamily, the 100 front doors. That leaves you with the remainder going to retail and restaurants. And we did 75% of that would be retail, and the remaining 25% is restaurant. That just gives credence, or gives acknowledgement to the idea that there's going to be more retail establishments than restaurants. And then, as you can see here, this is kind of the fallout of if 100% of that area was developed, you would be adding, you can talk in terms of the regional economy, a total of 18.5 million in GDP for just the multifamily, another 32 million for a retail, another 8 million for restaurants, which adds up to almost 60 million in new economic activity that that City Hall could provide a catalyst for. And then when you get into the actual economic output, which again, this is the economic impact, 32 million for apartments, 67 for retail, 16 for restaurants, and a total of 116 million in new economic activity. And in total, and when you add all the different pieces up of jobs, you're talking another 1,064 jobs in the area.
For a total of around $43 million in labor income.
And this is also, just before I forget to say this part, this is also just the construction impact. So this is temporary. This is the first step. When you get to table 5, this is the recurring number that you're going to see year in and year out, which again, broken down in those 3 components. I won't go through each one individually, but in total, you're talking about creating another 464 jobs that are going to be there every year, 17 million in local spending and from income, 28.5 in your total GDP, and over 53 million in economic impact. Here's the next piece. Table 6 goes into the tax, and what does this mean in terms of taxes? And here we broke it down into the 2 phases, construction and operations. The construction side, you can see we use local option sales. This is taxes on building material. We use impact fees, which are impact fees and permitting fees, and then the supply chain runoff costs. So this would be like if a construction worker goes and gets lunch somewhere, he's going to pay sales tax on his food. Altogether, it's about $394,000 just for the multifamily development, $800,000 for retail, $132,000 for your restaurant, which is a total of $1.3 million for the first phase in total. When you get down to the operations side, your real tax impact is going to be coming to two primary areas, which is your property tax, your ad valorem, and your local option sales. And in this case, we determined that there's going to be $645,000 total in annual property tax that you would now be receiving that you weren't receiving otherwise, if the whole area is developed again. So this is a maximum potential. But $172,000 would come from the multifamily, $379,000 from retail, and then $93,000 from your restaurants. And then altogether, when you add the local option, the sales, and the supply chain taxes, across all three different types of development, you're talking $724,000 in new tax revenue recurring annually.
So that's revenues every year.
Yeah.
And that's, once again, that's only with the assumption that City Hall is built there, it spurs economic development, and all this new money follows it.
That's basically what it is. I mean, that building a city hall over there would actually spur economic development. That would attract businesses to also locate in that
And-
area.
And if we didn't build City Hall, that would be the opportunity cost, would be that money that we didn't make.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you forego the benefits that you're supposed to get.
You forego the
Yeah.
catalyst.
And if you stay here, you forego the revenue that you're supposed to get from this lot here. And also,
Construction.
the revenues that you're supposed to get over there, you also forego that if you don't build City Hall. That's the opportunity cost. Well, another thing that we did was also to look at the other CRAs in Florida. What we did was to actually choose like 3 CRAs as a case studies for development in Bradenton. One was from Miami, Omni CRA, the Fort Myers Downtown CRA, and the Frenchtown CRA in Tallahassee, Florida. Each CRA chosen had either a commercial, non-residential business or multifamily development, as these types of projects bring to them a demand for goods and services elsewhere. The study actually looked at the average level of employment and earnings as the control variable by sector in previous 3 years and post 3 years of development. So in other words, we look at before and after. Okay, before and after. What happened before and what happened after once they actually introduced these developments into those areas. So basically what we look at are the growth differentials for the average to tease out basically the level of change in economic activity. In March 2014, Miami Omni CRA invested like $11.5 million in a full-service movie and television studio in downtown Miami. The EUE Screen Gem Studio, that's the name of it. It's a multi-purpose studio shared with television production company Viacom. The project reached a completion in October 2015. And following the redevelopment in September 2016, Fort Myers CRA also offered up to $3.5 million in rebates and construction companies for remodeling the downtown Amtel Hotel redevelopment, completed in June 2017, and rebranded as the Campo Feliz Senior Living Apartment Building. And in September 2021, the Westside Capital Group acquired the building with plans to turn it into a market rate apartment building, opening its 323-unit property to all ages. In 2018, Proof Brewing Company remodeled a vacant warehouse previously used to be to bottle basically Coca-Cola in Tallahassee. The completed renovation of the old bottling plant centered in the South Side CRA region, and it brings around 102 new jobs to the area with an expected impact of $23 million in total economic benefits to the zone. So now we have the examples of the CRA. It's like a comparative comparison between the 3 CRAs here. Go ahead.
So one of the ideas when we first built this was that we wanted developments that brought jobs and brought population. Because again, retail and restaurants typically chase demand, whereas you put in an office building, you have people that are kind of like a captive audience, you bring them in and they're stuck there. And so we found those 3 examples between these 3 CRAs. And again, this is using the same technique that we used at the beginning of the study where we were discussing the economic profile of the area. And we looked at the year the development was built. We looked at an average of the prior 3 years, and on average, what was the level of employment, and what was the level of aggregate income. And then we looked at the average level of employment and the average level of income for the 3 years after the development. And then once we had those two, we netted them against each other to see what the total differential was. And then we divided that net by $1 million to put this in units of millions to make an apples-to-apples comparison. And as you can see, for the Fort Myers CRA, they contracted slightly on the employment front, went down 18 jobs, but given the new supply chain effects, they actually added 27 jobs to the area, produced $5 million in local income, 7.5 million in local GDP, and 14.3 million in economic output. And another good way to think about the economic output is that's kind of like a quality of life number. The more output you do, the more production you do, the higher wealth, the more wealth there is in a region. So Fort Myers actually, on a per $1 million comparison, had the highest quality of life economic output and economic impact with their development. The Frenchtown CRA up in Tallahassee actually added directly 36 jobs to the region, 47 total. Added another 1.5 million in labor income, 2.2 million in GDP, and 3.6 million in economic output. The lowest was, oddly enough, Miami Omni CRA. They added a total of 11 jobs, added 11 jobs directly, 16 total, 798,000 in income, 1.2 million in value add, and 1.8 million in total economic output. All 3 cases kind of showed a pretty significant growth and a level change that was, tied to investment in the region. And it is, the other thing I want to add too is that none of these projects really took place overnight, and that's why we did 3 years before, and then we did 3 years after. So the total time scale we're looking at is actually 7 years. Just to kind of acknowledge that not everything pops up right away, but it does based on this evidence.
So, in closing then, based on the analysis that we've done and based on the data that we've researched on, basically relocating the new city hall along 14th Street corridor is the best option for Bradenton. That is the best option for Bradenton. The opportunity cost of not building the hall within the 14th Street CRA district is very, very high. If you stay here, you're gonna lose money here because you're not actually generating taxes here. Then at the same time, you're not doing anything to 14th Street. But if you move this city hall to that location, this place will generate income for the city, generate taxes, jobs, and other things. At the same time, you're actually developing that area, and that's gonna attract more businesses as it will spur economic development in the 14th Street. So that's really very important. And that's why the economic impacts of new construction and operational benefits from a mixed-use development at the old City Hall site is going to be delayed if you delay this thing further. The ripple effects of new expenditures within the 14th Street CRA district is also going to be delayed, So time is very important for this. We also found out that restaurants and retail establishments are smaller and typically chase demand. They're smaller in size. City Hall and multifamily would bring population. However, multifamily would bring fewer people than City Hall. Still, the City Hall trumps all the other kinds of options because it's just a massive investment that's going to be put out there. The lots available for multifamily development are relatively small and would provide few residents and even fewer workers. So based on the 3.74 acres worth of development capacity exists along the 14th Street corridor, the new City Hall would have ripple effects on the local economy. So, as my colleague mentioned here, he talked about the maximum potential impact. So construction impacts, for instance, it would create more than 1,000 construction jobs. It's gonna generate 42.7 million in labor income and adds another 59.4 million to the regional GDP and produces $116 million in total economic output. That is, if you move this City Hall to that 14th Street, it will have ripple effects. It will attract more businesses and economic activities in the 14th Street. Okay, so he also mentioned about recurring impacts. I just want to emphasize this, that it's going to create like around 464 jobs. It'll generate around $17 million of annual labor income and adds another 28.5 million to GDP, and it will produce $53 million in economic output. And in terms of tax revenues, the maximum construction tax revenue is 1.3 million. That will go to the city. The recurring annual revenue, so every year you're going to be getting this, is 725,000 each year. So that is the maximum potential that you will not get if you stay here. You have to move it over there. That's, I mean, the City Hall. So all in all, there's really a strong evidence based on our research, evidence of growth in the number of jobs, labor income, value added to GDP, and economic output as a result of development in other CRAs across the street. And based on our research, the CRAs that invested in this, especially the blighted areas, resulted in economic growth over time. It didn't happen over time, but usually around 7 years. Will this happen in the 14th Street? Yes, we believe so. The city will actually, if you build a city hall at the 14th Street and improve infrastructure and provide security and basically change that perception of what 14th Street is all about, this development will occur. Because this has happened all over Florida. Are there any questions?
I don't have any questions. Again, I feel like Gene Gallo up here. I can remember when the old City Hall was on the 15th Street site, and they actually held the farmer's market on that site, and people would drive up, go to the farmer's market, and leave. And we started doing things a little differently. We had events here, like Winter Wonderland and Get Down Downtown. We had the DDA put money into Baccarata. And it did take several years. But I can remember when you could have fired a shotgun down Baccarata and you wouldn't hit a single thing. And I can remember when you had Chef Mike's and Fisherman Joe's and the Old Main Pub.
Forgot about that.
That was it on Old Main Street. And I forgot, Dan Miller had his congressional office there. And there was a lady named Joy McIntyre that had a bead store. Because what was very funny, the very first Winter Wonderland, and I'm sorry, the Kangaroo Pub. They had to run across the street with each other to exchange change because they didn't have enough change to be able to conduct business that night. So it does work. It absolutely does work.
I mean, one of the examples that I think we didn't mention it here is in Tallahassee, where I live, Frenchtown.
Yes?
Frenchtown, and whoever went to Florida State probably must have remembered Frenchtown.
I lived on Macomb.
Yeah,
So did my,
I remember.
so
when
did
I was
my
a student
husband.
there, He'd say, you can go anywhere except that place over there. Don't go to Frenchtown.
Yeah.
Because that is such a bad area. But look at what Frenchtown now.
right.
They moved the administrative office of the City Hall from the main office, which is located beside my office, the Capitol, and move it to that place. And a lot of things are going on.
A lot of things happened
things
with
are
that.
going on. I think recently there's an investment of like $60 million. So
$60 million.
yeah, $60 million that's being,
Right.
built there. And another thing is the
College Town.
College Town is
street-
beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah,
beautiful. And they have scooters in College Town.
Yeah. And what street is that? Gaines Street.
Yeah, Gaines.
Oh, yeah.
Gaines Street was just, you can only see like auto repair shops and all that stuff.
And a couple of warehouses.
Yeah, and a couple of warehouses when I was a student there a long time ago, and now look at this place. It is so pretty. There's a lot of development. There's a lot of things going on, and that is because of the CRA.
Well, and again, 14th Street, when I was growing up, that was the way that you went from Tampa to Miami. You went down the Tamiami Trail.
Yeah.
And those motels, the mom and pop motels, were operational and they were profitable. Where the substation was recently, that the building that we're going to be taking down, that was Bureau's Spanish restaurant.
Yeah, that's why,
And
that's why we emphasize
so-
in our report that, you need to change that negative perception of that place. And how do you do that? Actually, it's when you invest over there, improve the infrastructure, and maybe like provide security,
Well,
increase
and
security in that area, and, people would feel comfortable going there. That's what it is.
we all know that private money will follow public money.
That will follow.
And if
Always.
City Hall is there, someone's going to come in and want to redevelop some of those areas and put in restaurants and put in services, because we're gonna have a full building of people.
This is a catalyst for
It
economic
absolutely is.
Right. Well, this is moving forward, and thank you for the study. And I just, because the combination that you're using of, I call this office, so office retail, So we've got the mix of housing, retail, and restaurants. Well, that is economic development. That's ideally, if you want to develop a city, you want all those things. You don't want one of them. You want all of them. And if all of them work, but for the longest time, we couldn't get anything down there, except the mat. Well, we had to give that property up for about a third of the value that we paid. And then, to make it still work, we gave them $3 million. Because, it wasn't gonna happen.
Yeah.
So that came at a great cost, but it's there and it's happening. That's a beautiful thing, it's happening. Now, we're bringing another component in, and what I'm hoping is gonna happen here is probably the same thing that happened when they moved City Hall down here 20 years ago. I remember the old mayor said, downtown will never be anything more than a seat of government.
You gotta say it correct. Government ain't never gonna be nothing but Bradenton ain't never gonna be nothing but a government center.
Right. And what happened was, by sheer accident, he proved himself wrong, because what I've watched happen is that, people got so angry that they all got voted out. But then all this talk of downtown happened, and then this is about when I came in and all, and we were really pushing for downtown development. It took a few shots at it, and literally everything that was coming in was bars. There was a lot of complaining about that, but the explanation to us was, the bars are always first, and the restaurants will follow. So we went along with that model, and it's now taken. So now downtown's taken off. We've got 2 hotels, we didn't have any. All this is happening, this
Got some
development.
wonderful restaurants.
And there'll be more to come, especially if this all happens here. So it's kind of like with the chicken or the egg. Well, you have to have the egg, and then you get the chicken. And this is the opportunity, to me, when this all came up, I'm like, I gotta tell you, I've always thought of moving City Hall down to the old 14th Street site, because I didn't think anything else was going in down there. Because it sat there for almost 20 years. And I thought, well, police would just move the whole operation, PD, and, well, obviously, we got housing in there, which is better. Housing's beautiful. That's what should happen. It cost us dearly, but I'm still glad we did it. And now this opportunity comes up, and what I'm hoping is there'll be a restaurant right next door. You got 300 people living right across the street, and now 120 office workers. Well, how long is it gonna take before a restaurant shows up right
Restaurants
there?
will be there.
Right.
They will be there.
Yeah, they chased him out.
Yeah, they will be there.
And I would,
The market's gonna be there.
I would like to have some serious rebranding and quit calling it 14th Street and call it Tamiami Trail, because I think it has that historical part to it, and I think when you name something, it gives it value, and I would like to change that in our vernacular.
Orlando found out that about Orange Blossom. Okay,
And
I'm speaking the truth.
and let's not forget, we're going to have to, because this has happened when 14th Street started making a transformation. All you did was push it east to Ward 5 and the CCRA. So we've got to even give this a little bit more expanded view, okay? Just
We
saying.
have to look at the ripple effect. You're
And
absolutely
that
correct.
ripple should not stop at 9th Street.
Well,
No.
And Rob and I have had this discussion. I've been going out to that area for a long time. I fly in and out of Albuquerque to go to Santa Fe and Taos, two areas earlier. I've watched that area grow, and what he said is happened there is happening here, is that they were land-bound by the mountains, so that the expansion could only happen in one direction. They had, and that's what we have here, is the river will not allow us to go any further. And then also to the east and west, well, we have the Wares Creek and the residential just to the west. And then really, once we start moving east, you got the hospital complex and all that, that's all developed. There's only one place for the city to grow. The city is gonna grow, and there's only one direction it can grow, and that is south, and that takes us right down to the intersection of 9th and 9th, which is right on the corner of MLK, and that is, to my opinion, MLK is the next opportunity zone that we really need to focus on, because I think it's just waiting to happen. And we're here, the time is here.
Yeah.
The time is now, that the market is finally caught up with us. I mean, in 2008, we were up there with Las Vegas on development before the crash. Just everyone was speculating on the Bradenton area. It was really Lakewood Ranch, Bradenton area, and then the crash happened. But now we have real live growth following that dark period. So I'm excited about the opportunity to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you for this, thank you. for the
Thank you
time
very
you put
much.
into this.
Thank you very much for having us.
I'm sure you've heard the comment about how you can compare a bikini to statistics. It's as important to see what it reveals as what it supports.
There you go.
Grew up here, and I didn't
Is it close?
Never heard that one.
know this.
It's true.
Go ahead.
Okay, so any more discussion on that item? We done?
It's awesome.
Okay, moving down to item number 5, all CRAs approve the updated building and site enhancement grant program.
Before Ms. Kaiser presents it, I just wanted to say a big thank you to my staff for reviewing the grants and coming up with these proposals. I know Chris Mignon worked hard on it, and he's at the FRA conference today, so he's not here to present, but him and Ms. Kaiser worked on it together. And I also would like to thank Greg DeLong, our planning assistant director, because we believe in the one city, one team. Whatever we do affects other departments. So we wanted feedback from planning, and I just wanted to say thank you to Greg for giving us some great feedback.
So good afternoon. Staff has wrapped up the revisions on 2 of the grant programs, one of which is the residential improvement grant, and the other being the exterior building and site enhancement grant. So rather than bore you by reading from page to page, what I'd like to do is just review the changes, and if you have questions or input, then we'll take it at that point. So for the residential improvement grant, there are obvious changes. We changed the references, to economic development to CRA. So there was some wordsmithing and changes made. We increased the dollar amount of available funding. The original grant was $2,500 with an 80-20 match. And we've chosen to put in homesteaded properties up to $10,000 with an 80-20 match. And that's with CRA funding of 50%, funding of 80%, and the applicant would have to pay for the 20%. On non-homesteaded properties, we have changed that amount up to $3,000 with a 50-50 match, with the CRA funding 50% and the applicant funding the other 50. We did remove the community service requirement, which, as you recall, if you were required to, you didn't have to, but you were encouraged to do volunteer work to receive an additional 20%. We've removed that since. Excuse me. We removed the special focus areas, and we've defined estimates for work, eligible work, to be a minimum of two estimates from licensed contractors, design professionals, et cetera. We had added into the grant that if the applicant chooses the higher estimate, the CRA would reimburse funds up to 20% more than the lower estimate, not to exceed the approved funding amount. Applicant/owners can apply up to 2 eligible grant programs or projects within a 3-year span. And we've emphasized even more that cash receipts are not acceptable. So those are the changes. We've tightened up the rules. We've tightened up the, guidelines to make sure that things we've learned from the past and, so did you have any comments? So I don't know if you have any questions.
You've increased the amounts by considerable.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
tightened it up and increased it.
We felt that based on the cost going up so much, to make it more, with more appeal to the residents, because some of them wanted to apply, but they didn't want to go through the hassle for $2,500. So not only does that help them during this economic period, but again, we removed inconsistencies. So some people used to do community service, some people didn't. So we felt we needed a program that everybody went through the same channel.
And it had to do also with the ability. Some people didn't have the ability to do volunteer work, so.
Right. No, I think it's great.
So, the other grant, but I'm not sure if we need a motion at this point for the residential improvement grant, for approval of that, or if we can we do both? I think we probably should do one at a time.
I would recommend potentially, if you have questions or more discussion on the residential, and then to have a motion.
Well, let's go ahead and knock it out. Anyone want to make a motion for the residential grant, and then we'll discuss?
It's not residential, we discussed.
Well,
we just
she
did
actually
the
went
residential.
out of order, so she did go through the residential program.
Yeah, she just.
Sorry, I
went-
had
you-
that listed first on
You
my,
just went through the residential program.
Okay.
Right,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
okay.
right.
just seeing if y'all are paying attention.
Following the agenda.
I caught that, no.
It's on my list. I
You gotta be
So
nimble
this
up
one
here.
goes up to how okay, so this one was
So
10,000?
that was a residential improvement grant that I.
Yeah,
So from 2,500, it goes depending if you're homesteaded or non-homesteaded. We felt, hearing the feedback that we've heard in the past, that we wanted to put focus on homesteads. But then when you drive down the street, the impact, the visual impact, nobody knows if it's a rental or a homesteaded. So we felt, let's try to incentivize that too, so that we can bring the whole community up. But instead of 10,000, they would only be allowed 3,000. And instead of 80-20 match, it's a 50-50. So they're not getting as much as homesteaded, but at least to offer an incentive for
Okay, but-
non-homesteaded.
Non-homesteaded may mean a rental property, correct?
That is correct.
yeah.
So why would someone who's renting a property want to put money into it that
No,
they
the
don't
owners.
own?
I think they just
Well,
are
see,
owner.
that's what we looked at, and that's a very good question. Because if it's a rental, there is an owner to that property. So if a renter, the likelihood of a renter wanting to do that kind of improvement to a place, first of all, would be unusual. Second of all, they would have to get permission from the owner to do that. And that's at which time we would determine, is this a homestead property? Is it a primary residence for someone, or is it a rental? So that's what made the cut. In as far as if it's your home, you're living there, your primary residence, and it's homesteaded, and that's the only way you can, be homesteaded, is to have that as your primary residence.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I make a
Yes.
motion? Move to approve the residential improvement grant program.
Need a second?
Oh, a second?
Okay, that's a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Oh, aye.
Wait a minute.
What
We'd
about
like some more
discussion?
discussion,
I'm sorry.
please.
Yeah, I've got some questions.
Sorry.
Again, it just gives me heartburn that we may be putting tax money into a rental property that somebody owns and is making money off of.
Well, not all rental
Well, but-
property is going for market value. That owner, that owner may need that extra money to make that, bring that up. You may be thinking about rental property like in your neighborhood. I'm thinking about rental property in mine.
Well, I'm thinking about some of the rental properties that I've seen that,
But if it improves the facade, it helps the whole neighborhood come up. And you're helping businesses too.
And they're not getting the benefit of that $10,000.
Yeah.
They're getting
I-
up to
I-
$3,000.
Anything that
you're
will
getting-
encourage improving the property from the exterior, I am in favor of.
I think you're going to have to watch that very closely and very carefully, because if you don't, it is a very slippery slope that could get the CRA in a lot of hot water.
Well, that was the
And we
question
could-
I
And
had.
we could also look at that owner. I mean, is this an owner that really has the ability to do it, just hasn't?
And I
as
can say,
opposed- I mean, in the application, there's a process, right?
that's correct. I
There's
can
certain-
say with relative confidence that, with plenty of confidence after my experience here going on 22 years, I don't think ever seen a residential improvement grant come in other than from the owner.
And I have a question.
If that happens, and as I say, it's unusual, but we'll have to look at that
Yeah,
to make that.
and if you're living on a street and there's a really bad rental
Yeah.
that's making the whole street look bad, and the government gives them some money to clean it up, no one's gonna complain about that. Because it might not happen anyway.
The
It
question.
won't happen in my neighborhood, they won't complain.
Well, the question I had was, did I hear, because I was looking at the wrong one. You could do more than one? Like, how often can someone do this? And is it based just on the property, or is it based on the owner?
It would be based on the owner, and it would be up to 2 grant programs every 3 years. So in other words, if they did, let's say they did the residential, and then they did the exterior building and site improvement. Like, so they do the residential, and then 8 months later, they come and they want to do the exterior. Okay.
Well, and there's
But after-
judgment in the whole thing, right? I mean.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
This all has to be reviewed, all the plans, permitting. I mean, there's
Okay.
far more to it than just coming
Fill it
into
out.
our office and us saying, oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's due diligence.
Well, I know that times things can be misunderstood and misheard, so I just want to make sure that we make it clear to everyone.
And I appreciate that.
And I do too, and keep in mind, we're talking about a CRA. I mean, it's
Yeah.
already a place that's blighted.
Right.
Okay.
End of discussion? Okay, so that was a motion. So all in favor of the approval of the updated residential grant program, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Okay, so next is the exterior building site.
I'm beginning to understand why I kept going I must be on the wrong page.
Yeah.
So to review the changes of the Building and Site Enhancement Grant, we did add the central CRA district. Prior to this, they were not included in that. Shame on us.
Yes.
Replaced the original building grant and incorporated a business grant, the business grant. We increased the dollar amount of available funding from $10,000 to $20,000. We removed the scoring matrix. We updated, reviewed, an approval process to match the other grants so that there's consistency among all of our programs. We updated the applications to match as well, same formatting. And we replaced the district map, the singular district maps with one map showing all 3 CRA districts.
And that's the changes? Okay. Any discussion?
Do we anywhere in here, I mean, are we saying anything that this is meant for profit, or are nonprofits allowed to apply for this?
Well, I think that's a discussion that we've had, kind of touched on. I believe, or my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we would talk about nonprofit grant packages or grant applicants on
Well, yes, so I mean,
Case.
we've talked about, this has come up before, and where it's come up is with events. And the nonprofits do the majority of events, so if you're not.
This is a grant program.
That's-
It
that's-
should
yeah.
spell it out directly in it, that's what I'm saying.
Well, And now's the time, if you want to add that, I think this would be the time to add it, right?
Well, I thought number D was policy on nonprofits for grant applications, and I'm assuming that would be all grant applications.
So,
Am I
Ms.
correct?
You're correct. Mr. Chair, a few months ago, we had a discussion up here about that, and the board had said until a policy is made, that nonprofits would not be eligible for grants. And so at the last meeting, we asked if you wanted us to discuss it at a workshop or here, so we put it on the agenda. We did not include anything about specific for nonprofits, but I think after the discussion on D, if any changes or any additions, we can go back and update the grants based on your guidance.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of the exterior grant and site enhancement grant program and application form as presented.
Second.
All right, that's motion a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, next, we have termination.
And the last item, Paul, I'm sorry. The next item is, because we combined the business enhancement grant program in the building and site enhancement grant program, it's a duplication of services, so we wanted to terminate this program. It's for $2,500, so now we have up to $20,000.
Okay, simple enough. Can I have a motion? Terminate?
Motion to terminate the Business Enhancement Grant Program due to duplication with other current CRA grant programs.
Great. Second.
I guess I'll second it.
Okay, motion a second. Any discussion?
What, is there anything that was in this that's not included in our other programs?
No.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now we are at policy on non-profit for grant application.
Like I mentioned, we are bringing it before you because we have received interest from a couple of nonprofits. in different CRAs. One of them is a religious organization, another nonprofit is not. So we just wanted to open up so we would know, because we don't know how to handle this at this point. So we need guidance and a policy from the board. Mr. Rudisell has done some research, so he would be more equipped to discuss it from a legal opinion. But we really need some instructions on how to proceed.
What's the law say?
Well, as it relates to not-for-profits generally, I think that's fine. If the board wants to fund them, wants to include them as they would any other property, I think they could do that. I think the board could also look at it on a program-by-program basis if you wanted to, for which ones would include not-for-profits and which ones wouldn't. The funding on the religious institutions is a little bit different. There's really kind of a split out there in terms of the legal opinions on that, and there's nothing definitive. So there's kind of a question mark hanging out there as to whether or not local governments can fund grants for religious institutions, and it stems from language in the Constitution that basically just flat out says, right, you can't make expenditures to religious institutions from the government coffers. So, some people have interpreted that as not including these types of applications. So I think in terms of how the CRA is looking at it, we can defend it if the board wants to include churches, but just be aware that there's no definitive law on that subject right now.
Well,
Okay. Ms. Barnett?
on cards.
Mr. Rudisill, my questions come from, say, something like this. You have a small community church that decides, because there's nothing else providing this activity, that they're going to do after-school tutoring, or they're going to operate some sort of daycare that would operate outside of the regular hours, because some of the individuals in the community may be going to work at 6 in the morning and not getting off until 6 or 7 at night, and the traditional daycare model of beginning at 8 and then leaving at 5 is not going to work for them. So it's to me, I guess it would be specific to what the request would entail, and if it was along the lines of, we are trying to provide a service in a blighted community that otherwise might not be there, that's one thing. Now, if you're asking for money to fix up the outside of your sanctuary, to me, that's another thing. I mean, one is trying to provide a service in a blighted area, and the other is mainly the responsibility of the congregants of that church. Am I splitting hairs here, or?
I mean, from a policy reason, standpoint, I don't think there's anything wrong with the position you're taking.
Because that's where I would be coming from with it.
Well, I think my position, though, is tax increment funding. It's all about raising the property values. And if you're not paying taxes on it, I mean, there is an argument to be made, I've come around a little bit, that if something is helping to create a sense of place, that might actually help spur on, additional, construction of something or bring another project with it, I can kind of work that out in my mind. But the whole idea is to raise property values, to increase the tax revenues. That's what we're about. We're not really a social program. And I'm not saying that we can't help neighborhoods and establish stuff like that. But I really feel like we need to be very limited. And I think once we open that door, it's going to be, it's going to be the floodgate.
And and that's, consistency is everything. I mean, if whatever your policy is going to be, it's got to be. So my experience here is that when this has come up, it's really been non-for-profits. And then, but when you get down, so the whole idea of a non-for-profit getting CRA money, it doesn't sound right until you stop and say, oh, wait, that's Habitat for Humanity. Oh, of course I want to do. Oh, it's Realize Bradenton. Well, we want to give them. So it really gets into the non-for-profit is where we have the dilemmas. Now, religious, I mean, we probably are going to have something coming up, but that's not been the majority of them. It's been a non-for-profit issue. It's been, but once again, when you open up religion, well, if you're going to open it up to one, you've got to do it all, or.
And again, in my mind, it was if they're providing a community service that isn't being done.
And if it's open to the community, not just their parishioners,
Correct.
you know.
If it's going to be something that's going to be you know, for example, if I remember correctly, when the Galvano one-stop center that is now Turning Points, and I believe they merged or participated with Daily Bread, there was funding, and I don't know if it was from the DDA or if it was from the city. I don't remember.
I think it was DDA.
But you can't help but say that what we were dealing with prior to that, while, again, it's biblical, the poor are always going to be with you. Prior to that, we had individuals that didn't have an address, they were not able to take a shower. They were not able to get their clothes washed. They were not able to work with a social worker to find out if there were veteran services that they were entitled to that they weren't getting. And they have an address now, they have a P.O. box where they can, when they fill out a job application, it looks a little better than saying that they live at the corner of Walk and Don't Walk. So, again, I think we have to look at what is the service? How is it going to assist us with improving and promoting the community in a way that will eliminate slum and blight?
I just think the focus has to be on eliminating slum and blight and raising property values. So with events, that to be a lot of like what Realize Bradenton did was creating activities down here that brought people down, that brought them to spend money at all these businesses. So that one doesn't bother me. But when you're talking about a grant on a building that's not paying taxes, I don't know. It just, we're talking big amounts.
I hear you, I do. How about, okay, it may be a nonprofit in terms of getting, you know, that payment, that tax on it, but if it looks good, then next door, who's paying taxes, will look good, and their value will go up, you know, based on how everybody on that street looks. I mean.
Again, and
they're providing a service.
I can go for that. I
They're
can go
providing
for
a
that.
service.
we know.
They're not pulling down the value of.
We know that once Art Center Manatee had a graphic of what they want to do and what they want their building, that was done by Wanamaker Jensen, one of the most outstanding architects in the United States. The people that are building next door, when they saw that, they went, wow, we gotta make some changes.
That
We're gonna
was
up our
like a
game."
changing, that was changing for me when I heard about the coming development because of it. And I could justify that.
So, Mr. Chairman, for me, I do not want to say I'm not interested at looking at any not-for-profits for grants. But again, it's going to have to be, is this something that is going to improve the area? Is it something that's going to provide better services? Is it something that's going to have a ripple effect? We've talked about the ripple effect on 14th Street, a ripple effect in the area. And for me, that's what I would base my decision on.
And I actually don't really like the idea of excluding just because you happen to have a religious base to your,
But it
Nonprofit.
we wouldn't necessarily have to exclude them
Mhm.
because unless they're putting restrictions on whom they're helping. If they say, well, only
Only people of
Baptists
this
can,
faith, yeah.
only Methodists, then there's a difference there. But when it's opened up to the entire community and
Well, as a
benefiting,
Methodist, I can tell you, we're open to everybody.
hey, the
Just
doors are
saying.
always
even the
open.
Catholics?
Yeah. My stepfather was an honorary member of our church. No, I'm dead serious.
Hey, you guys know
We're
who
getting
joined my
far.
church
We're getting
once.
far.
Yeah, we're getting a little off
Well,
kilter. Anyway,
I just-
anyway, is that giving you any direction?
If I'm hearing you correctly, and I would need the board to give me a consensus, the board would be okay with us bringing forward potentially an application from a nonprofit, as long as that nonprofit would have to make their case on how that money will be of public benefit and not just to further their cause.
Yep, right.
Yes.
And that includes religious organizations? Because that's where
As
we're at.
long
We
as
wandered
they're
into
not
that room.
restricted.
Well, again, if it's we want you to replace the roof on our sanctuary, not so much. But if they're going to say, look, we have noticed in our community, we've got, people that are working shift work and, they go in at 5 PM and get off at 2 AM, and there's no daycare that really handles that, and we want to start doing that. That, I think, is something that
Okay.
would be workable.
If I could ask a question, because I think the question that's on the table is to help staff with how they're administering these grant programs. So I don't know what all grant programs the CRA has, but I feel like most of them are more in line with the roof and facade type of work.
No, we've had grant applications come forward asking for money to assist with building of buildings, like when Meals on Wheels was done.
We have done chain my fence grant for replacing chain link fences with fences, which is an example of a church
Yeah, there's.
coming for that, interested in that. We have the two that we just approved today, the residential one, as well as the building and site enhancement. And we have the restaurant grant. So as right now, these are the 4 active ones, and we'll see in the future if we're gonna bring any new ones.
So in terms of the not-for-profits and the churches, all we're really talking about is these 2 grant programs that we talked about today, and then the fence one, right? So in terms of, because I think going back to what Mrs. Barnaby was talking about, those types of projects you're going to get on a case-by-case basis. And I think the board could look at those and make the type of determination that you're talking about. But I think the discussion, my understanding of kind of why this was on the agenda was staff was looking for some direction on how they were going to administer these grant programs. Is that?
Well, for example, when the church comes, I don't want to waste their time and say, I don't know. In the future, I want to be able to say, because you're a religious organization, this is the policy, or include it in the grant. So I just really needed guidance so they don't waste their effort or time if the board wasn't even interested in entertaining that idea.
And I think we've come a long way where it started off with the concept of we shouldn't be giving money to non-for-profits at all, and then we kind of revolved around to this, so, I mean,
Do we need an official policy motion, or is this discussion and the consensus okay?
I mean, depending on what we think the policy is, it probably makes more sense to actually put it in writing and bring something back for the board to adopt.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay.
I I'm not sure I totally understand what the policy,
Yeah,
what the.
I just feel like we need to be encouraging for-profits. I mean, there are plenty of, I have no problem with helping nonprofits. That's not what this is about. I just feel like that's not what our purpose is here. And so I would have preferred to have a policy that said that no nonprofits.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
chances are in a CRA,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a nonprofit providing a service as opposed to a profit because they're in a CRA area where there's a need to uplift. So if we're going to say no to a nonprofit, then it seems to me that's going against what the CRA is for.
No, the CRA is to raise property values.
Right. Okay, raise property values, but if it's.
Elimination of slum and blight. That's-
Slum and
Well,
blight,
which
and
basically is what you're saying, it's just hard, you know, it's
I mean,
slum
it
and blight.
sounds harsh,
And you,
but
exactly, you make it sound a lot, you know, a lot more palatable by saying increase, you know, property value, which it is. But in these areas, you're gonna probably find more nonprofits providing services than for-profit because they're,
Initially, until.
exactly. And then that changes
but they're
things.
not paying into that pool of money that we're dispensing.
But we don't have to have a unanimous decision on everything that we do
Oh,
either.
I know, I'm just expressing my
Yeah,
opinion.
no, that's what I'm saying, and we understand, and
Hear you.
Okay.
I hear you. You're looking at it from,
we hear you.
yeah. I hear you. I do. I hear you. That's why we have a board and we come with different, you know, experiences and expertise. That's why.
So still, so it sounds like they don't want to exclude, is what it sounds like. Because,
At this point in time, with this group that's sitting here, I think what you've heard is put a policy together that says that you will include for-profit and not-for-profit to be decided on a case-by-case basis. And then that policy will be brought forward, and the board will vote on that policy.
okay.
Okay, all right.
Am I wrong?
No,
I
no.
mean, that was kind of
Look, it's a sticky wicket.
what I was hearing. So, I mean, would it be fair, because there was some discussion about that there might be heightened scrutiny on a not-for-profit application to where the board's going to be looking for some type of community impact as opposed to, you know, in recognition of the fact that it's not going to be providing a TIF benefit. Okay. I'm sure Katerina can draw something up.
Give me 5 minutes.
Great discussion.
Okay. So we're moving down to the Bradenton CRA district funding request. We got 2 funding requests.
A few months ago, we were approached by the Sons group, by Steve and Glenn, and EDC, and they're working on 2 projects, and they want to present to us today to make a request for funding assistance to make these projects happen. So here with us today, we have Sharon Hillstrom and Lauren Kratz from the EDC, and Glenn DiStefano from Sons. They're going to give us a presentation that includes both projects, but then after the presentation, we can talk about the specific of each request.
So you need to give me some direction on how I advance slides.
Sure.
You guys have the presentation?
It should have been up there. I sent it to this.
Let me,
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
The
how
one
are
that
you?
says 6 proposal for 2 projects
Click on it.
on the left.
yeah, okay, so if you, the drawer there, if you pull out the drawer, you can use the keys to move.
Oh,
Mhm.
enter key, I suspect, yep.
Well, yes.
Oh, wait, here's a,
The mouse, whatever you prefer, or the up and
Whatever
down.
works.
Yeah.
the mouse never works.
No, I said whatever works.
Okay, all right. Well, great. I guess, should I wait for Ms. Barnaby to come back, or shall I just go ahead and get started?
I would say,
Move on. All right.
Yeah.
is that,
Okay.
We all get up and leave from time to time. Just keep
she
rolling.
can hear it.
I will keep rolling. I'm happy to do so. So thank you, Katerina, for inviting us to be here today, and good afternoon, CRA Board. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Sharon Hillstrom. I'm President and CEO of the Bradenton Area Economic Development Corporation. We're recognized by the state of Florida as the lead economic development corporation for the 9 communities that make up Manatee County. And I am really pleased to be here with you today to lend the EDC's enthusiastic support for 2 projects coming before you for consideration of incentives. It's an exciting time in the city of Bradenton. It was really wonderful to hear the presentation before mine about City Hall and moving it to 14th Street and what that can mean for the city. So that's awesome news. Transformation is occurring that will position the city to realize its full potential. Clearly, this has happened due to your vision, leadership, and investment from both the public and the private sector. Okay, that didn't work. Maybe this will. Oh, you know what?
It's,
not
yeah, so
in-
do the mouse, scroll down.
Oh, I gotta scroll,
yeah.
okay. There we go. All right, so let's take a look at some of the private sector investments to date that have contributed to catalyzing the transformation the city is experiencing. I'll highlight 4 projects. But before I do that, it is important to acknowledge where that private investment came from. Well, I suspect most of you know that investment came from Steve Herrig. Steve is the CEO of Sons Insurance, a serial entrepreneur, and a philanthropist. Steve's first investment in the city of Bradenton took place when he decided to move his Sons Insurance corporate headquarters from Sarasota to the city of Bradenton in 2016. Mr. Herrig's vision and over $10 million investment transformed a deteriorating, blighted 6-story commercial building. It is now a world-class, Class A corporate headquarters in the heart of downtown, employing over 150 people with high-skill, high-wage jobs. He didn't stop there. In 2020, he purchased the Bank of America building adjacent to the Sons Insurance corporate headquarters. Did some renovations there, and also retained ownership and management of the co-working space Connect Central. Arts Center Manatee, we talked about that just a little bit ago, was in need of significant additional funds to get their capital campaign for a new building across the finish line. In came the Steve and Natalie Herrig Family Foundation with a gift of $2 million to make the vision of a new art center a reality. You can see the rendering here of the new art center, which is sure to be an iconic gateway into the city of Bradenton. Then there's 920 Manatee Apartments. I saw some of you at the groundbreaking. What a cool thing that was. Desperately needed workforce housing, workforce apartments right downtown to employ workers in downtown and outside of downtown. Steve Herrig was the single largest investor in that project. Which brings us to the projects for your consideration that I referenced earlier, the Connect Central expansion and the Taverna Toscana restaurant concept. Let's begin with the Connect Central expansion. There's an increased demand for space from remote workers and entrepreneurs, which necessitates expansion of Connect Central. The projected capital investment of over $2 million will provide an upscaled existing space and on-site cafe. Oops. Got it. Okay. You got it? Okay, great. Next is Taverna Toscana. an exciting upscale Italian-inspired steak and seafood restaurant concept that will include indoor and outdoor dining and adds an elevated and I think hip dining experience to the existing culinary options in downtown Bradenton. Steve's team, oh, there we go. This is a little fussy here. Steve's team has partnered with celebrity chef Fabio Viviani and the BBAB Hospitality Group to develop this restaurant concept. No doubt, Fabio's celebrity will bring global exposure to the growing culinary scene in downtown Bradenton. With that, here are the specifics for your consideration about both of these projects. We have 2 new and expanding retail businesses within the Bradenton CRA with a combined capital investment of more than $6.1 million. Projected to create more than 70 direct and indirect jobs over the next 5 years. These 2 potential investments keep the transformation momentum going. Oops. There we go. The strategic location of these 2 businesses will enhance and provide much needed visibility and connectivity to our wonderful Village of the Arts, as well as serve as a catalyst to encourage future development. These 2 businesses, along with more than $25 million of additional investment in the city of Bradenton, not only demonstrate Mr. Herrig's commitment to giving back to the community, but align well with current revitalization efforts and the CRA's mission to promote the economic growth and future vision of the city of Bradenton. The ask is a request for $200,000 incentive award to support these transformational projects. I'll hand off to Katerina to review the specific components of this incentive request, or I'm also happy to take any questions you might have.
I'm just wondering why you didn't bring samples.
Or Fabio himself?
Well,
Of the Italian seafood.
yes, I was just,
Okay, a sample cocktail would have been just fine.
Another time.
my son's a chef. He brings samples.
That's all right, we'll just be looking for it.
We're kidding. Keep
You are? No.
We're just messing. We're just messing with you.
I hear you. I hear you.
So I will start with Taverna Toscana. So if you look under, so the recommended motions would be twofold. One involves the exterior building and site enhancement grant for up to $20,000 that we just approved, and the other one to approve the restaurant grant for up to $160,000 with authorization to engage with a conflict attorney to execute an addendum to the grant program. So if I may explain that. So because there's a conflict of interest with our CRA attorney, we would have to engage with a conflict attorney if we were to create any type of agreement. Our recommendation is, instead of actually doing a contract or agreement, all the proposed expenditures that we have been given that they would need would fall under the restaurant grant that we currently have. So the restaurant grant goes up to $35,000. So this would be an addendum to that grant. They would still follow all the regulations and the rules under the grant, but instead of $35,000, to have the amount of $160,000. That includes that $35,000. So basically an additional $125K for the restaurant.
Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Of course, I see that we've got, this is just for the restaurant.
This is just for the
Taverna.
restaurant?
Okay. I would like to make a motion to approve a restaurant and food services initiative program for up to $160,000 for Traverna Toscana LLC, and authorize CRA staff to engage the conflict attorney to execute an addendum to the grant program. Now, Mr. Rudisill, we're sure that there's a conflict here?
Yes, yeah, our firm does represent Mr. Harrigan's sons, so,
Okay.
so
So on
I've
this
alerted.
project, though? Is it,
What's that?
you represent them on this project or just in general?
We are probably involved on this project in some
Some
roles, so we,
Okay.
you know.
But Mr. Rudisill, let me ask, I was told that what we normally do if there's a conflict, that the CRA attorney would initially contact the conflict attorney to let them know.
And I was the one that raised the conflict here, and I reached out to Katerina and said that I could reach out to our conflict counsel and bring them into the loop on this.
Okay, well, because it says, and to authorize CRA staff to engage with conflict attorney, I don't want to, again, there are very specific times and reasons in which you engage a conflict attorney, and I want to make sure that we're following the proper protocol.
Yeah, I don't have an objection.
Okay. So I will there's actually two motions here. Do you want me to read both of them? Or do you want to vote on one at a time, which would? Okay, so that is my motion regarding the Restaurant and Food Services Initiative Program.
Second.
Okay, that's a motion, a second, discussion. Any, here's my concern. This came up before, and I'm all for this, I just want to put it out there, because I was here when the DDA was gonna do the Ezra deal, which kind of got into, it turned into a big deal. And some other restaurateurs were very upset because all of a sudden there was gonna be all this money going towards the Ezras and all. So by doing this, by moving away from our set amount, we're opening ourselves up for that, which is fine. I just want to make everyone aware of that.
Well, the next time anybody in town wants to tell us they're going to bring a world-class chef in and start redoing that sort of thing, then I'm happy to speak with them as well.
And as I said, I just wanted to, I remember that being a bugaboo, so I just wanted to bring it up, that that's,
I do remember that.
it was a bugaboo. I was in Washington lobbying when they called it. I am happy to tell you, I know nothing about this.
All right, well, so we have a motion and a second.
Motion a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Good. That's one
Who
down.
else wants to jump in?
Keep rolling.
You were doing so good.
Well, I'll be happy to make the motion to approve the exterior building and site enhancement grant program for up to $20,000 for the same organization, as presented here today.
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that's part one. And then we have the next property, Sons Property 2 LLC. And the request for that is for up to $20,000 for the exterior building and site enhancement grant.
We just did that.
Yeah,
Mm.
that was the second one.
No, that was the Taverna Toscana. So there's two
This
locations.
is Connect Central. This is going to the Connect. This says it's for the Connect Central,
But
Right, which is also
right,
Sun's
which is also Sun's property, but it's just a,
I guess there's two $20,000.
There's two $20,000 grants. One is for the Taverna Toscana, which was under your,
well,
Which I
then.
think we just
then-
did.
which
then I
you
will
ju,
be
we
happy
said,
to
yeah.
make the motion for the approval to the exterior building and height site enhancement grant. It's been a long day, people. Up to $20,000 for the property located at 1201 6th Avenue West, back in the day known as the
Second.
Yeah. Trying to
Just go.
Out of
Just go.
memory lane.
It's
Back in the
where
day.
Cafe is right now.
Yes.
Okay. Did anyone else second that?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Manatee National Bank, go ahead.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. I'm sure Mr. Herrig will be very pleased.
Thank you.
Samples are always a good thing.
Is that it?
That is the end of the lineup. That says other discussion and new business.
A few items on my end, but I know Ms. Towns is here, and I think you wanted to address the board regarding the back to Angola. So there's no decisions to be made. She understands it's a special meeting, but she did want to address you, and she didn't get a chance under citizen comments.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
And the time is here for the festival.
Coming up?
Believe it? It's here already. But I just want you to consider us again. We're coming short on our budget, about 31,000. And just want to know if you can reconsider giving us additional funding. If you can, that's fine, but we thought we would ask and invite you all to come to the festival on next week.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, it's not an
can't.
agenda item on a
Yeah,
special
We would not be able, like I mentioned, to do,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you wanted discussion to see if that would be something open to bring at the next meeting,
Yeah.
even though it's gonna be after the festival.
Yeah, no, I know you can't make a decision, just to keep us in mind, because we're paying the bills up front anyway and gonna be reimbursed. So we're saying if you can keep that in mind and see if there's anything else on that item list that we submitted that can possibly be funded to,
Okay.
yeah?
Well, so we'll need staff to give us some kind of,
Yes, of course.
Do we know what,
Correction.
I mean, what ended up, were there cost overruns, or what's different?
What's different is we had submitted a package to MCF, not realizing that we got in on their deadline, which is the first of the month, but they only view their applicants once a month. And our event will be finished. And for that reason, they're not sure they're gonna be able to assist. And we just thought we would circle back to those that have already assisted us and see if there's a possibility.
okay. Well, and once again, we have a really hard time discussing something we don't.
Yeah, I don't
Yes.
remember what we
Just out of the
funded and
blue.
what was
so-
on
Yeah.
that budget.
But-
Up to 7,500 for the eligible items that they presented in the budget that we could cover.
Well, we're gonna need some more direction from our staff, I
Yes,
think.
of course.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for everything that you did with our Riverwalk grand opening.
Looking forward to the festival.
Just wanted to give you a couple of the updates. And since it came up, I wasn't going to bring it up, but since it did come up about conflict attorneys, I just wanted to show you what the agreement was with Voss Law Firm so that you all are comfortable that we did the right thing. So this is the engagement letter that the city has with, that had with Voss Law Firm. So if you look at the second paragraph, and this is from 2019, it says that we understand that we will not provide any legal services to the city of Bradenton unless and until we receive specific direction from either your office, and that was addressed to Mr. Callahan as the city administrator, or Mr. Rudesel's office, that such representation is needed. We will, of course, do our own conflict check at that time and we will proceed with the representation of the city if we have no conflicts. So when we engaged with the conflict attorney, we followed this procedure that either our office or the conflict attorney could the attorney could reach out to the conflict attorney. So, excuse me, I shouldn't have come this fast. So if you all want to change the direction, how we should engage with a conflict attorney in the future, that's your decision and the policy that we need to know. But based on this engagement letter, the CRA director and the city administrator could go directly to the conflict attorney to engage with them if they felt there was a conflict of interest. And they did do their own conflict check, and they felt there was a conflict of interest, and that's why they took the case. So just wanted to bring it up since it did come up.
Which case is this?
With Realize Bradenton. That why, why if I had authority to go to a conflict attorney to engage with them. So the next, I just wanted to say this.
Get Mr. Rudersil's take on this, please.
I think the engagement letter assumes that our office would have declared a conflict, and then either we or the executive director would reach out to them. And the other reference to them running a conflict check is them running a conflict check for themselves, not saying they would determine if our office had a conflict in the matter, so.
Was there a conflict in the matter, Mr. Rudersil?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
So if we can go more into that, in advance, before we even engage with them, I sent out an email and there was nobody saying we don't have a conflict. So therefore, I proceeded with that. So on the 18th, as well up on the dais, if you play back the tape, it was mentioned that there is a potential conflict of interest, and I would be engaging with the conflict attorney. Nobody raised any concerns at that point. And again, I don't feel it was anything, but I just wanted to show you this engagement letter. I know you're saying it was assumed, but again, the way I read it is that either anybody could have reached out to the conflict attorney, whether it's my position or Mr. Rudersil. And again, if the board wants to change and give us guidance how to do that in the future, I'm up for that. I just don't feel that we did anything out of order or inappropriate by contacting a conflict attorney in order to protect the CRA. That was our only goal. To
I
make
guess
sure.
I'm really confused about what matter this was regarding. So you're saying there's a conflict between Blaylock Walters and Realize because they how is that a conflict? I don't.
The Blaylock Walters is on their board of directors. So when we're negotiating a contract with the nonprofit, since our CRA attorney is with Blaylock and somebody on their board of directors was with Blaylock, and then our conflict attorney at the time agreed that that was a conflict of interest and took on the case to help us draft a contract with them. So there was it's not a big deal. It truly, in my opinion, is not a big deal. It was a process, but because it came up on, some concern about if we have the ability to contact a conflict attorney, I wanted to give you this engagement letter to show of why we did what we did, so. I just wanted to also say, and I'll share this with you because I'm very proud of what the CRA staff is doing. We have a new year. This is our first meeting of the new year. And so we sat down, all of us, to kind of put together some projects that we're working on. And as of the end of September, we had 59 projects going on and activities that we are working on. For a staff of 3.5 people, some of them are, a few hours, but some of them take weeks to complete. So I'll share this with you because I think it's important to celebrate what we do. So I just want to say a big thank you to my staff. I know only Ms. Kaiser is here, the other two are at the FRA conference, but we are a great team. We do so much, and I'm proud of our team and what we accomplish.
We're proud of you too.
Thank you.
definitely making a difference in my area.
I also wanted to update you that yesterday the CCRA Advisory Board met, and there's some exciting things happening. So speaking of not just the 14th Street CRA, but let's keep our work going on the Central CRA. On November 3rd, if you want to put it on your calendar, from 6 to 8, we will have a community outreach program at Ward Temple AME Church, where we're going to invite the community in order to give us feedback about the commercial corridor on MLK, the 9th Avenue West project that we have with Business Flair. More information to share when the postcard will come out, but I just wanted to throw it out so that you put it, again, that's on your radar. Habitat for Humanity presented to the CCRA Advisory Board, and it was very well received to the point that they want to invite them back at the next meeting, and Habitat will be working on some potential sketches on what can go into the Central CRA, and then they want to give the feedback back to you for the November meeting. So we as staff were going to bring you a report on the CRA-owned properties and kind of get your feedback how you wanted us to proceed with that at the next meeting in 2 weeks. But the CCRA Advisory Board asked that we delay that until November 16th so that they have a chance to give you their opinion about that. So unless, if you guys don't have any problem, then I was gonna wait until the November 16th, or if you wanted me to bring it forward at the next meeting, it's up to you.
I think it should go through the advisory board first.
Yeah. What time was that on the 3rd?
6 to 8.
6 to 8.
What day was it?
It's a Thursday, and we will offer pizza and refreshments also.
What was the date?
November 3rd.
November 3rd.
And we will publicly notice it in case more than
Oh, okay.
you are there.
How many postcards do you mail out? Because last time it seemed like I remember hearing 900. I didn't hear that.
A
Last-
little over 900.
Last time was
900.
over 900. This one will be even more because it touches some of Bradenton CRA and some of the 14th Street CRA.
I seemed like I was talking about it, kind of defending us recently, and I said 900.
What was the time on it
When I
again?
said it, I was like, oh,
6
maybe
to
I over. But I thought 900.
And a lot of it is some of the Bradenton Housing Authority.
Mm-hmm.
They have many units, so that drove the number of postcards up. But we look at a circle based on whatever the project is and who is a stakeholder that may be interested.
What the complaint is they're saying we decided on a McDonald's and what have you without their input. So I just wanted to be reminded that I was correct as I was spewing that out.
And I would probably say we've been discussing for over a year in both city council and CRA meetings, so.
Hey, some people change my name, so.
Yeah. And then Brian comments, we can discuss, we need your guidance on that. I spoke to the developer and it's not gonna work out as a senior affordable housing. They had another architect firm look at the site and it's too small for them to make any money because with the construction cost being so high, it wouldn't be profitable. So it's not gonna move forward as a housing project with that developer. So I think that leaves it up for discussion. What do we want to do with that? So we don't have to do anything now. I just wanted to update you that we just heard that yesterday. And so in the near future, we will be coming back to you for that.
Okay.
So.
Oh, you're done? I have a question, because I know we've talked about this for quite a while. What about advisory boards for the other two CRAs? Because we made some pretty big decisions today in the Bradenton CRA, and it would have been good to have, like you said, you're worried about other restaurants having a problem, and if it had gone through more of a public, advisory board, it would have, it could have insulated it a little bit.
It's sometimes you gotta jump while the iron's hot.
Oh, I totally agree. I'm just saying, I've been
But
asking
we-
since I
yes.
got on here for advisory boards for all of them.
Had some serious distractions.
So
Have some-
I'm going to keep reiterating. I don't know what I got to do,
Well,
but
do we as board members need to perhaps come up with suggestions of individuals that either live or work in that CRA to provide that to the staff to get the ball rolling? Or how do we want to do this? Do we want to put a public notice out on the Facebook and the website and go that way? What do you want to do?
How did we do the CCRA?
Well, they had one.
We already had one.
They
right?
had one, and we just had to see
Kinda
how many of them were going to
recall.
actually stick around.
Is that the same for?
Well, you had
I was gonna
one
say-
as well, but
Well,
they
that's
just
what I'm asking.
let us go.
Yeah,
I mean, you
well,
could always go and,
They did the same to the CCRA.
I think it just
guess, and
expired
just said go.
supposedly.
So
But
maybe you could start with that.
Well, maybe, again, us as board members
I'm
need to
just saying,
provide the staff
do
with
it the same
some
way.
names of individuals that
I
might
can do
be
that.
interested in helping, and then that could get the ball
Do you
rolling.
want one or do you want two?
Well, again, I'd probably recommend giving two, and I'd recommend putting a notice on the website and a notice here at City Hall
Okay.
saying this is what we're looking for, so that it's not like we handpicked X number of people. It's that we, all of us know people that
Yeah.
live down here and work down here and might be interested, but there might be somebody else out there. Let's cast a wide
Well,
net.
we might want to take a look at the old policies or just determine our own policies, because you had certain areas of the business sectors that were represented. You also had to either live or work here.
It was a DDA board.
Correct.
But then it turned into an advisory, but yeah.
The DDA Advisory Board covered 14th Street and the Bradenton CRA.
Right, so.
And
And you had,
That would be the thing, if you wanted to do that, would you continue having one board do two, or would you have a 14th Street advisory board?
well, I think it'd be optimum to have two. I just don't know that it's feasible. It's hard to get people to volunteer. I think they're two different CRAs. They have two different personalities and two different, like, needs, but that's probably closer than some of the things with the central CRA. That's why it was always kind of separated, I think.
Right.
I don't know. I would like, the more we pull the public input into everything, the better.
it is.
And that's why I would like
But it
to,
also takes longer.
yes, I
It also
totally
takes
agree.
longer.
And I just wanted to say, it is on our to-do list.
Okay.
Last time you guys all voted and gave us direction to do it, the agreement was that we're gonna hire the second CRA manager, because they're gonna handle some of that. So we are working with HR actually to post it right now. So it's in the to-do. So the hope was that we were gonna get another person in so that they can handle that, because like I said, 59 projects, having an advisory board takes a lot of effort. It's not just we're having a meeting. We have to prep the materials, we have to take minutes, we have to bring presenters, we have to come back to you for everything. It's a lot of work trying to manage all that stuff, and we had 3.5 people until now. So that was,
I guess I
we
thought
didn't
Chris was
disregard.
that person that we were gonna hire, so
No.
okay.
So that was, we're not disregarding, but I thought that was my take. So if you want us to start now, let me know. If you want us to start in a few months, but when we have the new person in place.
That would be my priority, but, that's just my position.
Do it.
I definitely see the need to have an advisory board, but I also I've learned how much work it takes to prepare for those, so you definitely would need some more hands, that's for sure. I mean, maybe the board may come before the hands, but knowing that the hands are definitely needed.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
I want a CRA board. I want an advisory board of citizens. I'm not that, I want to work with what's reasonable, but if you ask me what I want, okay, I want a CRA advisory board for each of the CRAs, but I understand the limitations. I just don't feel like it's being a priority. That's the way I'm feeling. and I'm happy to help get names. I think we need to know, are you gonna try, like you did with the Central CRA, are you going to have different, people, like, do
Yeah.
you want educators, do you want realtors, do you want business owners, restaurateurs? I just don't wanna go willy-nilly and put people on there. I think it needs to be thoughtful, and I think we need a policy about it. Do you want them to live or work in Bradenton, in the city? I think that's key.
Would you like us at the November?
Property owner, a stakeholder.
I think we need the stakeholders back at the table, period. They all
No,
left.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I
they all
agree with
left,
you.
and we need them back.
Now, the question would be, so should it still be where you had the DDA, which is downtown, and then the 14th Street CRA? Because they'll,
Tammy,
actually, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you, the one thing y'all should do is through the MPO, go for that Tamiami Scenic Highway grant, which will get the ball rolling. But I agree with the rebranding of the sign. The rebranding is imperative. But the question would be, if you did it again with the way it was, and then the business owners and/or Village of the Arts folks, would they say, hey, foul, not fair, we should need our own board? That's just something to think, that's something to think about.
Yeah. I think it's more than we can decide right now. I'm just trying to put it back on the forefront.
And to be honest, all we said was just, let's get the staff going, let's get this, we got the budget going, because we've done a total reconstruction since the change. So, and all I said was just give us some time to get caught up.
Yeah.
I think we're there.
I'd be happy to work on the bylaws based on the bylaws of the CCRA advisory board. In there, it talks about who.
Who's advisory board?
The CCRA advisory board has bylaws, so I could create some bylaws for the other two.
Okay.
I think what,
I'll get a copy of that.
yes, and so you had to approve it, so it went before you. But then if you like that, then we do an advert, and I can bring that on the November 16th meeting. And then I think it's only fair that we get both names, we get the people that were involved in the past, but also advertised in the community to see who else,
And I could
and go
see,
through that application process.
I could see if you only did one board, just making sure that you had some representation from the village. But we'd have to remember that 14th Street CRA includes more than just the village. I realize they're the loud part.
Oh, no,
But one of the worst things to me was those people at the lower end that were kind of forgotten. I didn't even know they were part of it.
But they can always attend these meetings. It's not closed out. It's not just for the advisory board. So anybody in the 14th Street community,
Okay, well, I'm
Can
just
come and
saying my
join in.
opinion. I'm just saying my opinion.
Make sure they know about it.
Motion to adjourn?
Sounds good. Second.
Okay, motion to adjourn, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?